Well, hello, this is Jeff Gaudiosi, and you're on misplacedstraws.com where music comes to life. And my guest today is really one of the great voices in rock. You probably know him from his time with Motley Crue or The Union, The Scream, and of course, the Dead Daisies. Now, the Daisies are about to release a unique collection of blues covers called Looking for Trouble on May 30th. Please welcome John Corabi. Welcome, John.
Thank you for having me, buddy.
My pleasure. And, as most know, the Daisies are really kind of a collective of musicians with a fluid lineup. But who is in the band for this record and the upcoming dates?
Um, Obviously, Doug Aldridge,
Yeah.
David Lowy, Michael Devin on bass guitar, Tommy Clufetos on drums, and yours truly on vocals. And, I get coffee for the guys on occasion.
Someone has to do it.
Yeah, somebody has to do it, whatever.
Yeah, I've had Doug on many times, and he mentions that nobody brings a better cup of coffee than you. So, you know.
We've had a very long time to perfect it, so it's all good.
Now, I think every rock band to some degree has a blues influence. But what led the Daisies to decide to do an entire album of traditional blues covers?
You know what? Honestly, I will take it a step further. I personally don't think that there is a genre of music. Uh, I think the only genre of music that I can honestly say that I don't think it was influenced by the blues is classical.
Yeah.
Everything else, country music, rock and roll, rockabilly, like it's all blues, and then from there, like it kind of developed or morphed into, rap and R&B and, all this other stuff. But, um, it all kind of, it was like a happy accident. We had all seen that Netflix documentary on the sounds of Muscle Shoals.
Mhm.
Um, and the legendary Swampers that were made famous in the Leonard Skinner song Sweet Home Alabama. Um, you know, so we had the opportunity when we were in, and this, I apologize, this is a little bit of a long answer.
That's fine with me.
Marty Fredrickson's studio is part of the Muscle Shoals family tree.
Oh.
Um, and it originated at Fame, where we
Mhm.
recorded. The Swampers became famous. Then a few of those guys kind of left and started their own studio, which then became equally as famous as where the Rolling Stones recorded Gimme Shelter and I believe it was Wild Horses, a few other tunes. Bob Seger, Rod Stewart, la la la. It's just crazy the amount of artists that went through the doors of those two studios. And then once that place really, the second studio really took off, a couple of those guys left and started a studio in Nashville that was called Quad. And so when Marty moved here, he bought that studio.
Oh, wow.
So it was like this recording of the two records that we did, Light 'em Up
Mhm.
and Looking for Trouble. It was kind of, it was a lot of fun to see the guys again, be in the studio, be creative. But it was a bit of a history lesson as well. You know what I mean? A musical history lesson. So the room that we recorded in Nashville was this legendary room where, like, I don't remember all the artists, but I know for a fact Neil Young recorded
Mhm.
Harvest in this room.
Yeah. It's all you need. Yeah.
Yeah. So we were like, oh, you know what? Let's pack up, man, and go down to Muscle Shoals and start at the beginning.
Mhm.
So our manager made some phone calls and figured it out. And we were able to just go down there for, I think it was maybe 9 days, 10 days, But while we were there, we were like checking it out. And if anybody's ever been to Fame, it's a functioning studio, but it's also a museum. And they give you a tour of the place, and they take you upstairs to Rick's office where he started the publishing company and just all this other stuff. And and we were just so blown away at the history of the building. And then at night we would take a dinner break, and normally we would go back to the hotel and chill out, but we were just, we had Uber Eats on speed dial, and there was a liquor store right across the street from the studio, so we would go get a bottle of whiskey, a couple bottles of wine, and we just sit there and we just started jamming. And one of the things was this room that we were in, the Allman Brothers used to rehearse for a lot of their tours in these things. So we were like jamming some blues, just, and so Marty had the foresight to keep I say tape, but, obviously it was like Pro Tools.
Yeah.
And he just kept sessions going. And he was like, man, this stuff sounds pretty good. Like, so we talked to our manager. We're like, you know what? We check these tracks out. I mean, this stuff sounds really good. Let's fucking do a blues record. Let's just, and it was honestly like we've been questioned on some of the songs, the choices, but, these were songs that we all kind of knew off the top of our heads.
Yeah.
And then it was at that point, it was like, instead of like learning stuff, it was like, all right, how can we make this our own? Do you know what I mean? So it was like a funny thing. We picked all these songs that we all kind of knew, and then we would ask ourselves, what would Led Zeppelin do? You know what I mean? Like, only because you listen to things like When the Levee Breaks, their version of that is completely different than the original version, but it's so brilliant. And then even in My Time of Dying on the Physical Graffiti record, I think initially was called Jesus Make My Dying Bed. Um, so we just kind of looked at like how they took these songs, When the Levee Breaks and that one, and just kind of made it their own. And we were like, you know what, we may piss off a blues purist, but let's just do what we do to it and just make it the Daisies.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. What I love about the blues personally is you can watch the evolution of songs, from like some of the ones you did start with Robert Johnson, but there are so many different generations of that song that lead up to now. So it's interesting. Like you guys, I like the way that you approached it, where how could we make it ours? Was there a definitive version of any of these songs? You're like, okay, that's our base, but then we're going to daisify it.
No, it was weird. Like once we really committed to doing it, then we started, Googling and YouTubing. That was like homework at night.
Yeah.
We would go back and check out other versions of these brilliant songs. You know what I mean? And I got to be honest with you. Like I kind of know some of the blues, Michael Devin, but the funny thing about the blues, and I just saw a documentary yesterday on Brian Jones from the Stones.
Yeah.
And it was weird. Like they were influenced by the blues, the Stones. Like I think they said one of their first number one hits in England was Little Red Rooster,
Right.
which we covered.
You guys do. Yeah.
Yeah. But it was funny, like they took it over there and they brought it back over here, and it made Americans more aware of something that was here the whole time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I got to be honest with you, like, so when you talk to me, as a kid, like I would hear songs like "I Just Want to Make Love to You." I say by Foghat.
Yeah.
No, that's a cover song, dude. Terraplane
Yeah.
Blues is like Foghat's version of that was great. And they Led Zeppelin, How Many More Times, and just all these great songs that these guys. So that was my introduction to the blues, like their
Yeah,
versions of
same.
this stuff. So I can't say I'm a connoisseur, an aficionado of or whatever the word is, uh, you know, of blues music, but it's now like doing this. I've really started researching and going really deep, like, okay, who wrote this song and why did they write it? And so it was a bit of a learning lesson, and but just fun, you know what I mean? It's cool. And so we've always done a tip of the hat to the bands that we grew up listening
Yeah.
to in the 70s. So what we did now is like, okay, we always do songs by bands that influenced us. Let's go back even further and figure out who
Yeah.
influenced them. You know what I mean? So we may piss off a blues purist, but this is the face of a person that doesn't give a shit. I like what we did.
So do I. And earlier on, you were talking about some of those great studios, like Muscle Shoals and Fame. And, a while back, I was able, I kind of took a trip down there through Nashville and Memphis and got to see some of those studios. And when you walk in, the history hits you. I mean, the air is just thicker with that history. So when you're recording there, I mean, does it come out in your performance? Is there a performance that you're going to get at Fame or Muscle Shoals that you're not going to get recording, somewhere else?
Maybe I don't know. I know, like, you know I think musicians, artists, painters, poets, whatever you want to call it, they're inspired. Sorry, I've got the worst allergy cold
No.
thing going. But I think musicians are very emotional people and get inspired by the silliest things. Um, you know, and I have to be honest with you, I did have a moment. I was singing something in the studio, and when we were in Muscle Shoals, and again, I was sitting there. I had a whiskey and a cigarette, and I'm singing into this microphone, and I just happened to look up. I was in this, vocal booth, and I could see through the window the band sitting there, and I just kind of was like, while they were doing their thing, I just kind of looked up on the wall, and I saw this picture of Aretha Franklin with a whiskey and a cigarette. And I could be wrong, but I think she was using the mic that I was using to,
That's cool. Yeah.
So I was like, fuck, man, this is so badass. But that's part of the fun of it. That's John Corabi, the fan.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I was just saying, like, my first time playing the whiskey, all I could tell myself as I was walking on stage is the Doors played here. Robert Plant stood where I'm standing right now on their first American tour on this stage. You play the Troubadour. It's like, this is where Elton John started his
Yeah.
career in America. Or goes CBGBs, which I've played, so I've had the opportunity to check off some bucket list things. But you get inspired, and maybe it does fire you up a little bit more. You know what I mean? I don't know, but it's just, as a fan, I just recently, it was crazy. We've heard all these stories about the Ryman,
Mm-hmm.
the Ryman Theater,
One of my favorite rooms to see a show.
yeah. And I literally just did, it was me, Winger, and Tom Kiefer,
Oh, wow.
and we did a sold out show there. And I just did a little acoustic set and, told my jokes and whatever, did my thing. And my wife was like hysterical, but I walked off and I got a standing ovation at the Ryman Auditorium. And, she was like, "Oh my God, that was so amazing." And then it kind of dawned on me, like, holy shit, fuck, I played the Ryman. So yeah, maybe you're a little
Yeah.
more, there's a little more oomph in
Yeah.
the tank when you're doing those
Yeah.
places.
Now it was fun when I first got the press release on this record. Before I heard it, I see the song list, and the first thing that goes through my head is your voice is going to be great on these songs. So I think you have a voice that really fits them. But then the other thing, like I said, I've had Doug Aldrich on here a million times, talk about a lot of different projects, and I never thought that this would fit his style. And then I heard this record and he blew me away on it. I mean, Doug does an amazing job. When you guys, obviously you knew that that was there, otherwise you wouldn't have recorded the songs. But when you guys rehearse or sound check, I mean, are you kind of doing stuff like this where you're playing around in sort of different genres and seeing what everyone can do?
Yeah, you'd be surprised. Like, the great thing about this band is, for example, we torture everybody. Like before we go on stage, we've got a little boom box, one of those Bluetooth things, and everybody's always playing music, you know. But it's funny, this band will literally play like, Van Halen, something from Van Halen 2, then, you know, go to ACDC, then it'll go to like, what's that guy, ABBA, and then, what's it, is it Jerry Rafferty, the Baker
Yep,
Street
yep,
song?
Baker Street, yeah,
Yeah,
all
it's
down the
like,
line, yeah.
yeah, and it's like, so we're kind of all over the place, and we're just playing music. Uh, they'll play shit from the 50s, the 60s, the Doors, the Righteous Brothers, like the Everly Brothers. And, so that's one of the things that I love about this band is like everybody can find the beauty in, uh, just music.
Yeah.
And I think Doug, as a guitar player, um, you know, let's face it, Doug's been writing and playing music for, you know, 80% of his life. And he's kind of figured out, like, and I use that term loosely, figured out, but he knows you play for the song, you play for, nobody wants to hear, again, I'm not taking this as a slag, but nobody wants to hear Yngwie Malmsteen on a blues track.
Mhm.
So Doug's like, all right, I got to use, I'm going to try some different
Different set
guitars
of
here,
skills. Yeah.
different amps. I'm going to try playing some more slide on this thing. And I think he nailed it.
Yeah.
His playing on this record is fucking awesome.
Yeah,
You know what I
without a
mean?
doubt. And you guys, you're always on the road. Do you see a set where you kind of work these songs into a Daisy set, or you could do something separate and do a standalone blues set or show?
We've well, maybe at some point if we do a blues festival, we'll do that. But we've already been incorporating some of the songs into our set. Last year, end of last year, we added oh shit, I'm having a brain fart right now. um
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah.
We did one last year, and then we added this last tour that we did Crossroads and Going Down.
And again, you guys are always on the road. You just finished up in Europe. You got more European dates and UK dates on the website. Will we be seeing you in the US at all?
I would hope so. The US is it's a really funny market anymore. I mean, you know how it is. The radio is just non-existent for bands like us, and so you make do the best you can, and you know. But we just went over, did, I don't know, 8 or 10 shows that we couldn't do last year. And then I guess we're gearing up for this blues release. Um, but until they say, hey, you're doing the Atlanta Blues Festival or the whatever, I'm sure, there's some people that are going to want to hear make some noise or, so it's a little bit of everything.
And now you do a lot of solo touring yourself. You just mentioned the Ryman. Do you have any plans this year for either, a new solo record or doing some touring?
Actually, yes and yes.
Mhm.
I definitely plan on, but I got to be careful how I do this. Like I told the guys when I came back, I wanted to continue with a solo career,
Mhm.
and they were cool with it. But again, you have to. There's some coordination involved. You know what I mean? So it's like I don't want to release a record, you know, right before or after the Daisies are going to do it. So I leave that up to my manager.
Mhm.
You know, I just want to get in, finish writing and recording this record, give it to my manager and the record label, and you guys figure it out. You know what I mean?
Yeah, let somebody else work on the timing.
Yeah, listen, I admit it. I'm a tornado with just about everything. So it's like that's why you have a manager and a record label,
Mhm.
and the Daisies have a manager. So let those guys,
Yeah.
they're the advanced planners. They're the guys that are good at writing shit down.
Mhm.
Let them handle it and just tell me where to go and when to be there.
Yeah, but when you look at the schedule, I think this is the first time I could really remember that the Daisies put out two records so close together. I mean, it's been less than a year since the Light 'Em Up came out. Now, was that just because, like, did you get these recorded around the same time and then just sort of split it up, or was it just going back into the cycle that quick?
No, it was weird. We actually it was funny. Again, like a lot of people have asked me, like, how it is writing with this band. We do shit so fast. It's ridiculous. I don't think I've ever been in a band, even from my first record, Revolution,
Yeah.
with the band back in 15.
Yeah.
Uh, I flew down to Australia, and when we got there, the manager goes, "Okay, boys, you got a month." And I'm like, "To do what?" Like, do a new record. And I'm just sitting there going, "We don't have anything." You know what I mean? But somehow we always make it work.
Mhm.
And then we started working with Marty, and again, it was like, you know, 3.5, 4 weeks, 5 weeks to do an album. Well, like we would literally write, record, mix, master, artwork, everything's done. Here you go. Talk to you later. Peace out. And this time we started out with Light 'Em Up. We were going to, so we got together in Nashville. We started writing, mapping things out. And we're like, oh, hey, let's go down to Muscle Shoals and check that out. Yeah, that'd be cool. We went down there. We're still mapping out, doing all this stuff. But we actually wrote, recorded, mixed, mastered, Light 'Em Up, and recorded, arranged and recorded, mixed and mastered Looking for Trouble in 29 days.
My God.
So we did both records at the same
Yeah.
time. You know what I mean?
Mhm. It works. It works. Yeah. Well, we've been spending some time here with John Corabi. The band is the Dead Daisies. The record is called Looking for Trouble. It's a great collection of classic blues covers. You know all the songs, so definitely check out the Daisies version of them. It's out everywhere May 30th. John, thank you so much. It's been just so great getting to talk with you and have you on here. I really appreciate the time.
Thank you, buddy. Thanks for having me.
Best of luck with the record.
Thank you, brother.
Thanks.
See you.